Creation of the world, Part 1, the eternal silence before the beginning. In the beginning, there was no sound, no movement, no time. All was still. Beyond what the human mind can grasp, there existed only the eternal presence of God, complete, perfect, infinite. The universe was yet unspoken, like a thought waiting for its first breath. Darkness was not merely the absence of light, it was the absence of everything. There were no stars, no matter, no breath to stir the void. But in that vast and endless silence, God existed in fullness. His spirit, timeless and self-sustaining, was the only reality. And then, from that eternal stillness, came the first stirrings of purpose. God willed that there would be a beginning. What had no boundaries was about to know shape. What had no sound was about to echo with the voice of its creator. The moment before time. Before light, before worlds, before even the concept of a before, God's intention began to move. Imagine the cosmos, empty and without form, like an ocean of nothingness. Yet in that formless deep, something was about to change. The Spirit of God hovered over the waters. Not waters as we know them, but the primal depths, the raw potential of creation. Like an unseen wind above a sleeping sea, His presence moved, gentle but powerful, stirring the silence into readiness. There were no witnesses, no angels yet created, no sun to cast a shadow. Only God, Father, Word, and Spirit, three in perfect unity, preparing to speak existence into being. The first word. Then God said, "Let there be light." And in an instant that can never be measured, light burst forth, pure, radiant, unstoppable. It spread through the void like a river of fire, filling the nothingness with brilliance and purpose. Time began. Movement began. The first dawn broke over the newborn universe. God saw the light, and it was good. It was not yet the sun's light, nor the reflection of stars, it was the raw light of His command, the energy of His presence made visible. He separated the light from the darkness. He gave them names, for naming is the act of order. The light He called day, and the darkness He called night. Evening passed, and morning came, the first day in history. The order of creation. As the first light faded into the stillness of night, the Spirit moved again. God spoke, and His word shaped reality with each breath. "Let there be an expanse between the waters," He said, "to separate water from water." And so it was. The vast firmament stretched out, a great dome dividing the waters above from the waters below. Space itself unfolded, infinite and majestic. The atmosphere, the heavens, the very framework of existence began to take form. God called the expanse heaven. Evening passed, and morning came, the second day. The voice of the deep. Beneath the heavens, the waters stirred. God's command sounded again, echoing across the depths. "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear." It happened as He spoke. The roaring waters rushed and receded, valleys sank, and mountains rose. The earth emerged from beneath the deep, drenched yet new, its surface glistening under the first light of creation. God called the dry ground earth, and the gathered waters He called seas. He looked upon His work, and it was good. The air above was silent for a moment, as though creation itself paused in awe. Then the command came once more. "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit according to their kind. And life appeared. The awakening of the green. From the damp soil, green life pushed upward. Tender shoots broke the surface, stretching toward the unseen warmth of God's light. Grasses covered the hills, trees rose with strength, vines and flowers appeared in beauty the world had never known. In that moment, the earth breathed for the first time. The fragrance of creation filled the air, fresh, pure, alive. Each leaf and blade of grass testified to the wisdom of the one who spoke them into being. Evening passed, and morning came, the third day. The dialogue of light and darkness. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years." And so the heavens blazed with new wonder. The great light, the sun, took its place to rule the day, and the lesser light, the moon, to rule the night. Around them, countless stars appeared, brilliant fires scattered like jewels across the dark. The universe pulsed with rhythm and order. Time, once abstract, became measurable. Days began to flow, seasons would follow, and creation entered its divine pattern. God saw that it was good. Evening passed, and morning came, the fourth day. The voice that brings life. Now the waters and the skies awaited their command. "Let the waters swarm with living creatures," God declared, "and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the heavens." From the depths of the oceans came motion, fish of every shape and color, gliding through currents newly formed. Great sea creatures rose and fell beneath the waves, their songs echoing through the deep. Above, the air stirred with movement. Wings fluttered for the first time. Birds soared across the sky, filling the heavens with their cries. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." Evening passed, and morning came, the fifth day. The ground stirs with life. Once again, the voice of God resounded, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures, cattle, creeping things, and beasts of the earth, each according to its kind." The soil trembled, and the first forms of life began to move across the land. Herds of animals roamed the plains, small creatures scurried beneath the ferns, mighty beasts lifted their heads to the wind. Each carried the imprint of divine creativity, each unique, yet part of one harmonious design. And God saw that it was good. The pause before the greatest act. The earth was alive now, filled with light, water, and living things. The heavens shone, the seas danced, and the land pulsed with life. Yet, amid all the beauty, there was a sense of anticipation. Creation itself seemed to wait, as if it knew something greater was yet to come. For God had one more work to do, His masterpiece, His reflection on earth. But that, the greatest act of all, would come with the next breath of His word. Creation of the world, Part 2, the image of God, the creation of man. The earth was full of life. Rivers ran across the newborn world, carving paths through valleys and feeding the green fields that stretched to the horizon. The sky was alive with wings, the sea danced with countless creatures, the land pulsed with the breath of beasts. And yet, creation was incomplete. For all its beauty, there was no one to understand it, no being to look upon the wonders of the world and lift a voice in gratitude. The animals moved by instinct, the stars followed their course, and the sea whispered to the wind, but none could speak the language of the Creator. The heavens were perfect, but they waited. The earth was full, but it longed for one who could walk with God. The divine counsel. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." The words carried a sacred weight. For the first time in the story of creation, God spoke not to the void, nor to the elements, but within himself, Father, Word, and Spirit, in perfect unity. It was a moment of divine intimacy, a decision that would echo through eternity. Man would not be a creature of instinct, nor merely another living form. He would bear something of the Creator himself: thought, emotion, will, and the capacity for relationship. He would be made to rule over creation, not as a tyrant, but as a steward, to care, to cultivate, and to worship. And so, from the dust of the ground, God began his most personal act. The breath of life. The earth, still wet with the morning dew of creation, became the cradle of humanity. God reached into the soil and formed the shape of a man, not yet alive, but perfect in design. His hands shaped the brow, the eyes, the heart, the hands that would one day build, and the feet that would walk upon the world. Then, God did something he had not done before. He leaned close. The Eternal breathed into the nostrils of the man, and the man became a living soul. In that moment, dust became flesh, and silence became breath. The first heartbeat echoed across the valley. The man opened his eyes, and light, God's light, filled them. He sat up, gazing at the world around him, the sky ablaze with color, the rivers gleaming like silver, the trees heavy with fruit. The air was pure, alive with the hum of creation. And before him stood his Maker, unseen, yet undeniably near. The first awakening. The man was called Adam, meaning of the earth, for he was formed from it. He was both humble and glorious, earth and spirit joined as one. Adam rose to his feet, feeling the strength of life flow through his veins. His first breath was borrowed from God, his first thought was gratitude. Though words had not yet formed on his tongue, he knew instinctively that he was not alone. He looked upon the animals and felt wonder. He saw the flight of the eagle, the stride of the lion, the gentleness of the lamb, and he named them, one by one, as the Creator brought them before him. Each name carried understanding, for in naming the creatures, Adam participated in the creative work of God. It was the first partnership between heaven and earth, the beginning of man's purpose. And God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. The gift of dominion. God blessed the man, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. Subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and every living thing that moves on the earth." But this dominion was not given as a weapon of power. It was a trust, a calling to care for what God had made. Adam was to tend, to nurture, to guard the balance of life. The animals looked to him without fear. The earth yielded its strength willingly, for harmony flowed from the Creator through the man. It was peace, not merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of perfect order. Every creature knew its place, every sound was in tune. The Garden of Delight. Then the Lord God planted a garden in the east, in a land called Eden. It was not a wilderness, but a home, a place of beauty and abundance. Trees of every kind grew there, bearing fruit both for nourishment and for delight. Rivers flowed through it, dividing into 4 great streams that would later water the earth. God placed the man in the garden to work it and keep it. In Eden, Adam found purpose. He tilled the soil and watched life flourish under his care. He listened to the songs of birds in the branches and the whispers of wind through the leaves. In the cool of the day, he walked with his Creator, not through ritual or fear, but in friendship. There was no shame, no sorrow, no death. Only peace, joy, and belonging. The two trees. At the heart of the garden stood two remarkable trees. The tree of life, whose fruit gave unending vitality, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which stood as a boundary, a choice. God said to the man, "You may freely eat from every tree in the garden, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." It was not a threat, but a truth, the law of love expressed through freedom. For love cannot exist without choice, and obedience without choice is not obedience but instinct. Adam heard the command and understood it. Trust would be his first act of worship. The longing of the heart. Days passed, and the garden flourished. The animals came and went, the rivers sang their endless songs. But as Adam watched them, he noticed that each had a companion. The birds flew in pairs, the deer grazed side by side, and even the fish swam in harmony. And for the first time, the man felt something new, a quiet ache within his heart. He had work, beauty, and the presence of God, but he was alone. He did not yet know what he lacked, only that creation seemed to move in twos, and he was one. The Lord saw this and said, "It is not good for the man to be alone, I will make him a helper suitable for him." But that moment, the creation of woman, was yet to come. The sacred reflection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with gold and crimson, Adam looked across Eden. The light danced on the rivers, the air was filled with the scent of life. He felt the presence of the one who had formed him from dust and breathed into him the gift of life. And in the stillness, Adam spoke his first words, not to command, not to question, but to praise. "Lord of all that is, you have made me from the earth, and yet you have filled me with your Spirit. I am yours." The wind stirred in response, gentle as a blessing. The Creator's presence filled the garden once more. Evening passed, and morning came, the sixth day. Creation of the world, Part 3, the creation of woman, bone of my bones. The garden lay in perfect peace. Morning light filtered through the leaves like liquid gold, and every living thing moved in rhythm with the Creator's design. The streams sang their endless songs, and the trees clapped their branches in silent praise. Yet amid all that harmony, one heart was quietly incomplete. Adam had walked the paths of Eden for many days. He had named every creature that moved upon the earth, the lion, the dove, the ox, the eagle. He watched them live and move in pairs, each having its companion. But when the last of them had passed before him, Adam felt an unfamiliar stillness within. He had known awe, joy, and purpose, but now he knew longing. The solitude of the first man. Adam looked across the garden, watching two deer drink from the river's edge. They lifted their heads together, eyes bright with life. He smiled at their grace, but deep within him stirred a question he could not name. "Lord," he whispered into the still air, "you have made all things good. Yet among all you have created, there is none like me." His voice carried through the trees but returned unanswered. Only the wind responded, brushing the grass as if in quiet understanding. God heard the ache of the man's heart. It was not a flaw, but a reflection of his own nature. For love cannot exist in isolation, it must be shared, expressed, received. The Creator, who is complete within himself and yet overflows with love, saw that his image in man would remain unfinished until man, too, could give and receive love. The deep sleep. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone, I will make him a helper suitable for him." As the evening settled upon Eden, a soft haze covered the garden. The sounds of the day faded, and the stars began to pierce the twilight sky. God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, not the sleep of weariness, but a holy rest. The man's breathing slowed, steady as the rhythm of the rivers. His body lay still upon the ground, but his spirit was held in the hand of God. From Adam's side, the Creator took one rib, not from his head, that she might rule over him, nor from his foot, that she might be beneath him, but from his side, close to his heart, that she might stand beside him, loved and equal. God closed the place with his touch, and from the rib, he began a new act of creation. The crafting of woman. The same hands that shaped the mountains now formed something tender and new. God shaped the rib with care, weaving strength and grace into every line. The breath of life, which had once turned dust to man, now moved again, not into clay, but into living flesh drawn from living flesh. And so the woman came to be. Her eyes opened to light for the first time. She saw the beauty of Eden, the flowering trees, the sparkling rivers, the sky that glowed with the breath of dawn. But unlike Adam, she was not alone at her awakening. God stood before her, unseen, yet near, and she felt his presence as warmth and peace. A sense of purpose filled her soul, a knowing that she was part of something greater, born not from the dust, but from life itself. The first meeting. When Adam awoke, the air seemed different. The morning light was softer, the songs of the birds sweeter. He sat up, looking around as if something sacred had passed while he slept. And then he saw her. She stood a short distance away, her hair catching the sunlight, her eyes alive with wonder. She looked upon him as one who recognized something deep within herself, familiarity, connection, destiny. For a long moment, neither spoke. The garden itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Adam rose to his feet, his heart full. The words that came to his lips were the first song ever spoken by man. "This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." It was not a statement of ownership, but of recognition, the joy of finding what had been missing, the harmony of wholeness restored. The union of two. The Creator looked upon them, man and woman, standing together in the light of the new morning, and he blessed them. He said, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living creature that moves upon the earth." The words were more than command, they were a promise. Together they would carry the image of God, not separately but as one. The man reflected the strength and vision of his Maker, the woman reflected his tenderness and wisdom. Together they revealed the fullness of divine character, unity within diversity, love within purpose. And the two became one flesh. The harmony of Eden. Days turned into evenings, and evenings into mornings. Adam and the woman, soon to be called Eve, walked the garden paths in peace. They spoke with God in the cool of the day, and every part of creation responded to their presence. The animals trusted them, the ground yielded fruit willingly, and even the breeze seemed to sing when they passed. There was no shame between them, for innocence was their clothing. They were unafraid to stand before God, for there was no separation, no sin, no fear. They laughed often, worked together, and marveled at all they were given. Every sunrise was a new beginning, and every sunset a hymn of gratitude. The wonder of difference. Though they were one, they were not the same. Adam's strength was steady and sure, Eve's grace was like water, flowing, life-giving, reflective. He built and guarded, she nurtured and understood. Together they balanced the world around them. Adam would marvel at her insight, how she saw beauty in the smallest things, how she could read the rhythm of the garden as if it spoke to her. Eve would admire his courage, how he faced the unknown without fear, trusting the God who made him. They completed each other, not by erasing their differences, but by embracing them. The divine blessing. God looked upon them and upon all that he had made. The rivers gleamed like mirrors, the stars shone in perfect harmony, the earth was alive with praise. And the voice of the Creator filled the heavens. It is very good. With those words, the seventh day drew near, a day not of labor, but of rest. The first chapter of creation was closing, not in exhaustion, but in satisfaction. God had made the heavens and the earth, and now, in man and woman, he had placed his image, love reflected in love, unity born of relationship. Evening in Eden. As night fell upon the garden, Adam and Eve sat beside the river, watching the stars flicker to life above them. The moon rose slowly, casting a silver path upon the water. Adam looked at the woman beside him. "You are the answer to my waiting," he said softly. She smiled. "And you are the beginning of my song." The breeze rustled the trees, carrying their laughter through the garden. And from the heavens came a silence filled with joy, the Creator's smile resting upon his creation. Evening passed, and morning came, and all was very good. Creation of the World, Part 4, The Garden of Delight, Life in Eden. Morning came softly to Eden, light spreading across the garden like a golden tide. Mist lifted from the rivers, and the air shimmered with freshness. Dew rested on every leaf, every petal, and the scent of life filled the breeze. Adam awoke to the music of creation, birds singing, waters murmuring, trees swaying in rhythm with the wind. There was no pain or decay, only harmony. He rose and saw the woman gathering fruit near a grove of golden trees. Her laughter blended with the melody of morning, and for a moment Adam simply watched, the first sunrise reflected in her eyes. All was whole. All was good. The heart of the garden. At the center of paradise stood the tree of life, radiant and tall, its fruit glowing faintly with the essence of vitality. Nearby grew the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, beautiful yet solemn, a sacred reminder that trust was part of love. For rivers flowed from Eden, Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, their waters nourishing the world beyond. For paradise was not meant to be isolated, it was the fountain of creation itself. God placed the man and woman there not just to live, but to steward, to care for what he made. The rhythm of work and rest. Each day had its rhythm. At sunrise Adam tended the trees, Eve cared for the vines along the streams. Their labor was joy, the earth responded to their touch. When thirsty, they drank from clear rivers. When hungry, fruit hung heavy on the boughs, figs, pomegranates, fruit unknown since. They worked not for survival, but delight. In the evenings, when the sun painted the horizon, they rested beneath the great trees, sharing discoveries, the birth of a blossom, the call of a bird, the laughter of the waters. The presence of God. As the heat of day faded, a hush would fall. And in the cool of evening, the presence of God walked in the garden, not in thunder, but in quiet nearness. Adam and Eve rose to meet him. They felt no fear, for in his presence was perfect love. "Father," Adam said, "look what has grown today." "It is good," the Lord replied. "You have cared well." Eve asked, "Why does the river sing as it moves?" The Lord smiled, "Because even the waters rejoice in life." There was no veil between heaven and earth. Eden was their meeting place. The dance of companionship. Adam and Eve were one, not just in flesh but in purpose. Their differences were reflections of harmony. When Adam worked the ground, Eve's hands followed, adding grace to strength. When Eve tended plants, Adam brought laughter and endurance. They walked among beasts that feared nothing. Eve said, "Even the wild ones know your voice." Perhaps, Adam smiled, "They know the one who gave it." They were content. The world was good, and so were they. The gift of understanding. They began to see deeper meanings. Adam saw balance, trees stretched to light yet yielded to night. Eve saw gentleness, rivers gave life by flowing, not holding back. All creation taught wisdom. Strength without mercy becomes hardness, beauty without humility fades. And above all, they learned that love was the law holding the universe together. The first Sabbath. Then came the seventh day. The Creator rested, not from fatigue, but delight. Adam and Eve rested too, sitting near the tree of life, watching rivers gleam. In stillness, they felt God's heartbeat within creation. Eve whispered, "Everything is perfect." Adam nodded, "It feels as though the world itself is breathing." And they felt his peace more deeply than ever before. The garden's whisper. Time had no sting. Each sunrise was a gift, each night, renewal. Sometimes they wandered near the edge, where rivers met the wilderness. The Lord had told them, "All is yours to enjoy, but from the tree of knowledge you shall not eat." They understood, freedom without trust becomes rebellion. The tree was not temptation but a lesson. Love is proven through obedience. The song of perfection. In the evenings, they sang, "Blessed be the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. From his hands we came, and in his love we live." The stars shimmered brighter, all creation joined in the song. Peace before the shadow. Eden was complete, untouched by fear or sorrow. Yet beyond the horizon, unseen, another story waited, a whisper soon to be spoken. But for now, peace reigned. The garden glowed under starlight, and the man and woman slept beneath the Almighty's care. Evening passed, and morning came, the day of rest, the day of joy. And God saw all he had made, and behold, it was very good. Creation of the world, Part 5, the gift of choice, the tree of knowledge. Morning light glowed softly across the garden. Mist rose from the rivers, shimmering as it caught the dawn. Birds sang in harmony, and the world breathed peace. Eden was alive, full of color and rhythm. The air was sweet, the soil fertile, and every living thing thrived. Adam and Eve walked through the garden as its guardians, caring for all God had entrusted to them. At the heart of paradise stood two trees unlike any others. The tree of life, radiant and generous, offered fruit freely, the gift of renewal. Beside it stood the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, beautiful yet solemn, its fruit glimmering like amber. It was the only tree in all of Eden forbidden to them. The command. One evening, as golden light fell across the garden, the Lord spoke to Adam. His voice was calm, like water over stone. "You may eat freely from every tree," said the Lord, "but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." Adam bowed his head. It was not fear he felt, but reverence. This was no threat, it was truth. Life with God depended on trust. He told Eve, and she understood. The command was simple, the obedience joyful. They desired nothing beyond what God had given. The meaning of choice. Days passed, and the garden thrived. Rivers sparkled, trees bore fruit, and every seed grew strong. Yet sometimes Eve's eyes wandered to that single tree, perfect, still, mysterious. She did not long for it, only wondered. Why would God make something so beautiful, yet place it beyond our reach, she asked one day. Adam replied, "Perhaps because it belongs to him alone. It reminds us we are not gods." Eve nodded. "Then the tree is not a curse, but a gift, a way to remember who we are." "Exactly," Adam said. "Choice itself is his gift. Love means nothing without it." They walked on, their hands entwined, unaware that their understanding of choice was only beginning. The days of innocence. Life in Eden was full of joy. They worked, rested, laughed, and worshipped. There was no death, no sorrow, no shadow. Each morning they walked among the trees, greeting the animals. Each evening they met the Lord in the cool of the day. His presence filled them with peace. At times they passed near the forbidden tree. Its fruit glowed softly in the sun, but they felt no urge to touch it, only respect. Even the wind seemed to whisper through its branches, "Trust." A subtle wonder. Seasons passed, and the tree remained untouched. Yet Eve noticed how its leaves never withered, how its roots glowed faintly at dusk. It seemed alive with mystery. "Perhaps it's not meant to harm us," she said one afternoon, "but to teach. Maybe knowing good and evil could bring us closer to God." Adam shook his head. "Some things belong to him alone. We were made to live, not to know all things." Eve smiled. "Still, it is beautiful." Adam looked at her and thought, everything God made is beautiful, even what we do not touch. The first distance. Peace remained, yet something subtle began to shift. There were moments when Adam worked alone, and Eve lingered near the groves. Sometimes, while gathering fruit, she looked again at the tree and wondered what knowing really meant. It was not desire, not yet, but reflection. She began to sense her own freedom, her own will. Awareness grew, like the faint shadow before sunrise. The Lord still visited them in the evenings, but Eve sometimes felt her heart race before his presence. It was not guilt, only awareness, the awakening of conscience. The gift and the warning. One night, as stars glowed above the river, God spoke again. His voice was firm yet gentle. "You are free," he said. Free to love, to care, to create. But freedom finds its truth only in trust. Do not seek what is beyond what I give. For the knowledge of good and evil is not food for life, but for death. Eve asked, why would knowledge bring death? The Lord answered, to know good and evil apart from me is to see the world without light, to know without wisdom, to live without peace. His words lingered like wind through leaves. Both listened in silence, their hearts heavy yet calm. The quiet before the test. Time flowed gently again. The garden bloomed, laughter filled the air. Yet beneath the peace, a question began to form. Eve often walked near the forbidden tree, tracing its roots with her eyes. Could knowledge itself be wrong? She wondered. Could something made by God bring harm? Adam noticed her glances but said nothing. He trusted her heart. She trusted his. Both believed they understood God, neither saw how fragile innocence could be. Far beyond them, unseen, another presence waited, one who would soon whisper a question that would change everything. The evening before the choice. The sun sank low, painting the sky in amber. Adam and Eve walked through the fields, their hearts peaceful yet restless. Do you ever wonder what it's like to know everything? Eve asked softly. To see as God sees? Adam paused. Perhaps it would be too heavy for us. Even now, we see enough to praise Him. She nodded, eyes drifting toward the distant tree. Still, sometimes I feel there's more we're meant to understand. He smiled. Then let us wait until He gives it. Whatever is good, He will share in His time. They turned away. Behind them, the last light touched the forbidden fruit, and for a moment, it gleamed as if alive. The stillness of trust. Night settled over Eden. The stars shone brighter than ever, and the garden rested. Adam slept peacefully, his heart untroubled. Eve lay beside him, gazing at the heavens. She thought of God's words, of the beauty of the tree, of the mystery that called to her mind. Lord, she whispered, help me to trust. The wind hushed. The river slowed. The garden held its breath. Dawn was near, a dawn unlike any before. Soon, another voice would speak. And the world would never be the same. Creation of the World, Part 6, The Whisper in the Garden, The Temptation. Morning broke softly over Eden. The mist lifted from the rivers, and light filtered through the trees in golden threads. Birds sang their first notes of the day, and the air shimmered with peace. Adam tended the garden nearby, humming as he worked. The soil was rich beneath his hands, the plants alive under his care. Eve walked further along the grove, basket in hand, gathering fruit and flowers. The day was bright and quiet, until she heard a voice. It was not God's voice, nor Adam's, nor any sound she had known before. It was soft, smooth, almost melodic, like the rustle of leaves in a still breeze. The serpent appears. There, coiled upon a branch near the forbidden tree, was a serpent. Its scales glimmered like bronze in the sunlight, and its eyes held a strange light, intelligent, calm, watchful. It spoke. Did God really say, the serpent began, that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Eve paused. She had never heard an animal speak, but the words did not frighten her. They seemed curious, even kind. No, she replied softly. "We may eat the fruit of every tree, except this one." God said, "You shall not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die." The serpent's eyes gleamed. "Die," it said, almost laughing. "You will not surely die. God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like him, knowing good and evil." Eve stepped closer, her heart steady but her mind stirred. The serpent's tone was not harsh, it was persuasive, thoughtful, almost tender. The seed of doubt. She looked up at the tree. Its fruit shone like polished gold, its fragrance sweet in the air. For the first time, she saw it not as forbidden, but as beautiful, desirable to make one wise. Why would he forbid it, she thought, if it could bring understanding? The serpent moved slightly closer, his voice almost a whisper. "He does not wish to harm you, Eve, but he wishes to keep something for himself. You are made in his image, why should you not be as wise as he?" Eve frowned. "We are already like him. He made us in his likeness." "Then prove it," the serpent said softly. "Taste what he has made and see. Will he truly punish what he created?" The words were like ripples spreading across still water, quiet, yet unstoppable. The struggle within. Eve turned away, walking a few steps back, her heart heavy with conflict. She loved God. She trusted him completely. And yet, the serpent's words awakened something she had never felt, curiosity mixed with pride. She remembered the Lord's voice, "In the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." But what was death? She had never seen it, never known it. Could it be that the warning was only a test? Her eyes lifted to the fruit. It gleamed like fire under the sun. Its beauty was undeniable. She reached out, then stopped, her hand trembling. "Lord," she whispered, "I want to trust you, but I also want to understand." The serpent spoke again, gentler now, almost kind. "He gave you a mind, did he not? Why would he forbid you to use it? Would a loving creator keep you blind?" Her breath quickened. Her thoughts blurred. The garden seemed strangely quiet, as if the world itself was waiting for her choice. The moment of decision. Eve's hand closed around the fruit. It was smooth, cool, perfect. Nothing about it seemed dangerous. She looked at it, then at the serpent, who watched silently, his eyes reflecting her own hesitation. In one final whisper, he said, "You will not die. You will become more." Eve lifted the fruit, her heart pounding. She hesitated only a moment longer, then bit into it. The taste was sweet, but strange, like light and shadow at once. The moment she swallowed, something changed. The air around her seemed to shift. The colors of the garden grew sharper, almost blinding. Her thoughts expanded, filling with both wonder and confusion. She felt awareness, not just of beauty, but of vulnerability, of self. For the first time, she saw herself apart from God. The gift turned to burden. At first, there was no pain, no punishment, only silence. Eve stood still, the fruit in her hand, the serpent watching. "Do you see?" he whispered. "You have not died. You have awakened." Eve breathed deeply, trying to understand the new feeling stirring within her. It was power, but also weight. Knowledge had come, but peace was gone. She turned toward the garden path where Adam worked. Her hands shook as she held out the fruit. The choice shared. Adam looked up, surprised. "Eve, what have you done?" "I tasted it," she said, her voice trembling. The serpent spoke. He said we would not die. "And look, I am still here. I understand things now, Adam, things we never knew." He stared at her, fear rising in his heart. "The Lord told us not to." "I know," she whispered. "But what if He meant for us to grow, to know as He knows? What if this is part of the plan?" Adam looked at her, the woman God had given him, bone of his bones, flesh of his flesh. He saw the tremor in her voice, the light in her eyes. Love and sorrow battled within him. Finally, he reached out, took the fruit, and ate. The moment he did, the stillness shattered. Eyes opened. Their eyes were opened, but not as they expected. The light of Eden dimmed, and a chill swept through the air. Awareness came, of self, of nakedness, of shame. Eve gasped and clutched her body. Adam turned away, trembling. The innocence that once clothed them vanished like mist in sunlight. They looked around, desperate for covering, and gathered leaves from the trees, stitching them together in haste. But the leaves could not cover the heaviness within. For the first time, they felt fear. The serpent was gone. His voice, so soothing before, faded into the shadows. The silence that followed was different, heavy, sorrowful, final. The sound of footsteps. Evening came, as it always did. The wind cooled, and the golden light faded. But when they heard the sound of God walking in the garden, their hearts froze. They had always run toward Him before. Now, they ran away, hiding among the trees they once cared for. The Lord called out, His voice echoing through the still air, "Adam, where are you?" And though the story would continue in tears and mercy, that call would echo through all generations, the voice of a father searching for his children who had chosen their own way. Creation of the World, Part 7, The Voice of God, The Confrontation. The evening wind moved softly through the garden, carrying the scent of earth and fruit. The sky burned with the last colors of sunset, yet peace had vanished from Eden. Among the trees, Adam and Eve hid, trembling, clutching their coverings of leaves. Their hearts pounded as they heard the familiar sound, the footsteps of the Lord walking in the cool of the day. But what had once been a moment of joy now filled them with dread. They pressed themselves deeper into the shadows, afraid to meet His gaze. The voice came, clear and sorrowful, not angry, but heavy with grief. "Adam, where are you?" The words rolled through the trees like thunder wrapped in compassion. Adam closed his eyes. He had never hidden from that voice before. He had always run toward it, eager to speak, eager to listen. Now his breath caught in his throat. "I heard you in the garden," he said finally, his voice trembling, "and I was afraid, because I was naked, so I hid." The Lord's reply was gentle yet piercing. "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat?" Adam's silence stretched between them like a chasm. Then the words spilled from him, desperate and broken, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit, and I ate." His voice cracked, half excuse, half confession. Eve turned, her eyes full of tears, but she said nothing. The Lord looked upon her with both sorrow and tenderness. "What is this you have done?" He asked softly. The woman bowed her head, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The serpent deceived me," she said, "and I ate." The words hung in the air, small and fragile, yet they carried the weight of all creation. The truth was spoken, and the silence that followed felt eternal. The Lord stood among them, Creator before His fallen creation, and the garden itself seemed to weep. The leaves rustled mournfully, the birds fell silent, and the rivers slowed as if the whole earth felt the wound. God spoke, not in rage, but in justice. To the serpent He said, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all beasts. You shall crawl on your belly and eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He shall crush your head, and you shall strike his heel." The serpent slithered away into the darkness, and his shadow became part of the curse itself. To the woman, God said, "I will greatly increase your pain in childbearing. In sorrow you shall bring forth children, yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Eve bowed her head and wept, for she understood not only pain, but loss, the loss of the harmony that once bound her to the Creator and to the man she loved. Then God turned to Adam. His voice, though sorrowful, carried truth that could not be softened. "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree which I commanded you not to eat, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth for you, and by the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for from it you were taken. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return." The words echoed through the garden like a final verdict. The world that had once been all joy now carried the weight of mortality. The light dimmed, the air grew heavy. Even the trees seemed to droop under the sorrow of creation undone. Adam stood silent, his face wet with tears, while Eve clung to him. The shame that covered them was not just of body but of soul. Yet even in judgment, mercy stirred. God looked upon the two He had made in His image, and love still burned within Him. He saw their fear, their brokenness, their confusion, and His compassion rose above His wrath. He took the skins of animals, innocent lives taken for the first time, and clothed them Himself. The garments were rough, but they covered their nakedness. It was the first act of redemption, a promise hidden within grief. Eve touched the garment and felt warmth, not just of fabric, but of forgiveness. Adam bowed low and whispered, "Thank you, Lord." The Lord looked toward the east, where the horizon glowed faintly with the first light of morning. "The man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil," He said. Now he must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life, and eat, and live forever. There was pain in His words, not anger. Immortality and sin would be worse than death. And so, for their sake, He would send them away from Eden. The wind rose, sweeping through the trees as if creation itself prepared to say farewell. The rivers roared, the birds scattered, and the earth trembled with sorrow. God led them to the edge of the garden. Adam looked back one last time. He saw the rivers that had nourished the land, the trees that had shaded their rest, the place where they had first walked with God. Eve clung to him, her eyes full of tears. "Will we ever see it again?" she asked. Adam could not answer. Then the Lord spoke softly, "One day, a seed from the woman will crush the serpent's head. Through pain and time, redemption will come." His words were a promise, faint yet unbreakable, a whisper of grace that would echo through every generation. Then, With a wave of his hand, he closed the way to Eden. Cherubim appeared, radiant and terrible, and a flaming sword turned every direction to guard the path to the tree of life. Adam and Eve stepped beyond the garden, the earth beneath their feet now rough and cold. The sky stretched vast and unfamiliar above them. Yet even in exile, they were not forsaken. God's presence lingered like the last warmth of sunset, distant, but not gone. They walked into the wilderness hand in hand, clothed in mercy, carrying both sorrow and hope. Behind them, Eden glowed faintly in the night, the place of perfect beginning now sealed, waiting for the day when grace would open it again. Evening passed, and morning came, the first day of the world's long journey toward redemption. Creation of the World, Part 8, East of Eden, the first dawn of exile. The wind blew cold across the plain. The light of Eden still glimmered faintly behind them, but each step carried Adam and Eve farther from the garden, farther from the place where they had walked with God. The soil beneath their feet was rough, filled with stones and thorns, unlike the soft ground they had once tended. The air no longer carried the fragrance of paradise, it was heavier, colder, touched by something they had never known before, sorrow. They walked in silence. Adam's face was set toward the horizon, his heart torn between guilt and resolve. Eve followed close beside him, her eyes searching the sky as if she might still glimpse the glow of God's presence somewhere among the fading stars. The night grew long, and when they could walk no further, they stopped beside a stream and built their first fire. The sparks rose into the darkness, fragile lights against the vast unknown. They sat close, wrapped in the skins the Lord had given them. For the first time, they felt the chill of night, the ache of hunger, and the sting of loss. "It is quiet," Eve whispered. "Too quiet." Adam nodded. In Eden, even silence sang. "Now it feels empty." He took her hand, rough and trembling. "We will live, Eve." He said we would. "The ground may resist us, but we will plant again." She looked at the fire, its glow reflected in her tear-filled eyes. "Do you think he still watches us?" Adam gazed upward. "Always." They stayed awake through the night, listening to the wind moving through the dry grass. Somewhere beyond the hills, the rivers of Eden still flowed, but the flaming sword now guarded the way. Morning came slow and pale. The first dawn outside paradise. The sky burned red like a promise and a warning. Adam rose and touched the soil. It was hard and unyielding, but when he pressed his hand into it, it gave way slightly, still capable of bearing life. "This will be our ground," he said quietly. "We will make it live." They worked together, learning through pain what they once knew through joy. The earth no longer yielded easily. Thorns tore their hands, sweat stung their eyes. Eve learned to grind grain, to make bread from the harvest Adam gathered. Each loaf was a memory of the garden, food now born from labor instead of abundance. When the sun fell, they rested and spoke of what was lost. "Do you remember the tree of life?" Eve asked. "How its leaves shone in the light?" Adam smiled faintly. "I remember. Its fruit tasted like eternity." She closed her eyes. "I dream of it sometimes. In my dream, the river still flows, and I hear his voice calling us back." Adam said nothing, for the same dream had visited him too. Time passed, and life found its rhythm again. Eve bore a child, her body trembling with pain she had never known. But when she heard the baby's cry, joy overcame her sorrow. She named him Cain, saying, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later she bore another son, Abel, gentle and quiet, whose eyes held peace like still water. Their children were the first to know the world as it had become, not paradise, but promise. Adam taught them to work the fields, Eve taught them to pray. In the evenings, they sat together beside the fire, telling the stories of Eden, the light, the trees, the voice of God that once walked among them. The boys listened wide-eyed, though neither could imagine such a place. "Will we ever go back?" Abel once asked. Eve looked into the flames. "Not we," she said softly. "But one will come who can." Years flowed like rivers, carving paths of sorrow and strength. Adam's hair grew silver, his hands hardened by toil. Yet each sunrise reminded him of the same truth: though they were exiled, they were not abandoned. Sometimes he would climb the nearest hill at dusk and look toward the east, where Eden once glowed. He could not see the gates, but he felt the memory of light within his soul. He prayed not for return, but for mercy. He began to understand that God's presence was no longer tied to a place, it lived in the longing of the heart. Eve, too, carried that hope. Though pain had entered her life, she saw grace woven through it. When she held her sons, she felt both the curse and the promise, the echo of God's words, "Through your seed, redemption will come." She did not fully understand, but she believed. Sometimes, in the cool of evening, she thought she heard something, wind moving through unseen trees, the faint echo of the voice that once called their names. It brought tears, but not despair. For even east of Eden, God still whispered. The seasons changed. Rain fell, and the land responded. Crops grew, though slowly, and herds wandered the plains. The family built shelter from stone and wood, learning to live by their hands. They laughed, they wept, they survived. The world outside Eden was hard, yet alive, a place of both struggle and grace. One night, as the fire burned low, Adam looked at his wife and said, "Do you think the curse will ever end?" Eve's eyes reflected the glow. "He promised," she said. "And his promises never fail. Perhaps not in our time, but someday." Adam nodded, his gaze turning upward toward the stars. They seemed brighter that night, as if heaven still watched, still remembered. He felt something stir within him, a quiet faith that death would not have the final word. As sleep came, he dreamed of the garden once more. But this time, he saw beyond it. He saw a distant figure walking through thorns, bearing light in the darkness. He did not understand, but peace filled his heart. When he awoke, he held Eve close. "The world is not lost," he said. "Only waiting." She smiled faintly. "Then we will wait with it." The sun rose over the horizon, washing the land in gold. The rivers far away shimmered like distant memory, but new streams flowed nearby, cutting paths through the soil of exile. Adam took his hoe, Eve gathered seed. They began again, their hearts heavy yet hopeful. Though they could no longer see Eden, they carried its echo within them. East of the garden, under the same sky that once shone on paradise, life continued, broken, but blessed. And somewhere, far beyond their sight, the gates of Eden still stood, guarded by fire yet glowing with promise, waiting for the day when mercy would open them again. Creation of the World, Part 9, Brothers of the Field, Cain and Abel. The years after Eden flowed like slow rivers, each season marked by labor, sweat, and the fragile joy of life sustained. The garden was gone, but its memory still lived in the hearts of Adam and Eve, and in the eyes of their sons. Cain was the firstborn, strong and restless, his hands made for the earth. He tilled the soil with determination, forcing crops from stubborn ground. Abel, the younger, was quiet and gentle, tending flocks that grazed along the hills. Where Cain's strength was fierce, Abel's peace was deep. They were brothers, born of the same mother, shaped by the same curse, yet walking different paths. The land around them was wide and wild, filled with both beauty and hardship. The soil yielded grain, but only through toil. The animals multiplied, yet predators prowled at the edges. Life outside Eden demanded effort, but also taught endurance. Each morning, Cain rose early, his muscles burning from labor, while Abel led his sheep to the meadows, their bells soft against the wind. In the evenings, they returned to the fire, where Eve baked bread and Adam told stories of the garden, of trees that shone with light and rivers that sang. The brothers listened, though the stories felt like dreams. To them, Eden was not memory but legend. Yet the God who had walked there was still near, unseen but known. Adam had taught them that the Lord was worthy of honor, that all life was his gift, and that gratitude must be returned. So it came to pass that both sons brought offerings to the Lord. Cain, the farmer, gathered from the fruit of the ground, the grains he had worked so hard to grow. Abel, the shepherd, brought the firstborn of his flock, the best of his lambs, pure and without blemish. They placed their offerings upon stones and waited. Then came a sign, unseen by the eye but felt in the soul. The Lord looked with favor upon Abel and his gift, for it was offered from faith and love, but Cain's offering found no favor. The air seemed to still. Abel bowed his head in humility, while Cain's heart burned with confusion and pride. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight, his spirit boiling with a fire he could not quench. He turned from the altar without a word, his shadow stretching long across the field. That night, he lay awake, his mind racing. Why him, he thought. Why not me? My hands bleed from the earth I work. Is my offering less because it bears the mark of sweat instead of blood? He could not rest. Anger grew like a vine, winding through his thoughts, choking out peace. The next morning, the Lord spoke to him, not in thunder, but in a quiet voice that reached his heart. Cain, said the Lord, why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not, sin is crouching at the door, its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. The words hung in the air like light through mist. For a moment, Cain's heart softened. But then pride returned, whispering louder than wisdom. He told no one of the Lord's warning. Instead, he sought his brother. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the field, Cain said to Abel, "Come, walk with me into the plain." Abel followed willingly, unaware of the storm brewing in his brother's soul. They walked in silence for a time, their footsteps crunching against the soil. Then Abel spoke gently, "Brother, your face has been troubled. Will you not tell me what burdens you?" Cain's eyes were dark. "You always speak as if you know his will," he said. "Tell me, Abel, why does he love your offering and not mine?" Abel hesitated. I do not know, Cain. Perhaps it is not the gift, but the heart behind it. He asks for faith, not pride. Cain's breath grew sharp. Faith? And what of toil? Does he not see my labor? My fields? My struggle? Abel reached toward him, his voice soft. He sees it all. But he also sees the heart that gives it. Do not let bitterness grow, brother. The Lord is merciful. But Cain's heart was already deaf. The seed of envy had become rage. His hand tightened around the stone he had hidden. The air stilled, the earth seemed to hold its breath. Then came the blow, swift, fierce, final. Abel fell without a cry. His blood darkened the soil, seeping into the ground that Cain had once called his own. The world was silent again, but the silence was no longer peace, it was horror. Cain stumbled backward, staring at what he had done. His brother's body lay still, the light gone from his eyes. The field that once fed them both now held death. The sky above seemed to dim, the earth to tremble. And then came the voice. Cain, said the Lord, calm yet filled with sorrow, where's Abel your brother? Cain's mouth went dry. His heart pounded. I do not know, he said, though the lie burned his tongue. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord's voice deepened, heavy with truth. What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a wanderer upon the earth. Cain fell to his knees, trembling. My punishment is greater than I can bear. You have driven me from the ground and from your presence. I shall be hidden from your face and a fugitive all my days. Whoever finds me will kill me. But even in judgment, mercy remained. The Lord said, No. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken sevenfold. And the Lord placed a mark upon him, a sign of protection even for the guilty, a symbol that mercy still walked beside justice. Cain rose, weeping, and turned his face eastward. He walked away from the land of his father, from the place where his brother's blood stained the soil, and he went out into the wilderness, into the land called Nod, the land of wandering. Behind him, Adam and Eve mourned. Eve's cries echoed through the hills, for she had lost 2 sons, one to death, the other to exile. Adam sat in silence, his face to the ground. The weight of their choice in Eden now bore its full fruit. Yet even in that grief, a flicker of faith remained. For the God who had clothed them still watched, still waited, still promised redemption. And somewhere in the earth that drank Abel's blood, grace was already at work, quiet, unseen, preparing the long road toward forgiveness. Evening passed, and morning came, the day the world first learned what it meant to kill, and what it meant for God to still love. Creation of the World, Part 10, The Land of Wandering, The Mark of Cain. The sun sank low behind the hills as Cain walked alone into the wilderness, the shadow of his crime stretching long before him. The earth that once answered his touch with life now rejected him, the soil beneath his feet felt cold and barren. Each step carried the weight of exile, each breath the sound of his brother's name echoing in the silence. The mark of the Lord burned faintly upon his skin, not a wound, not a scar, but a sign that he belonged neither to death nor to peace. It was mercy bound to judgment, a reminder that even in punishment, God had not abandoned him. The wind howled across the plains, lifting dust into the air. Cain did not look back. Behind him lay his father's tents, his mother's tears, the fields that had once fed him and now cried out with Abel's blood. Ahead lay the unknown, a land without promise, a life without rest. Days passed, and hunger gnawed at him. The earth yielded little. He wandered eastward, through dry valleys and stony ground, until he found a plain where the river bent through a field of reeds. There he stopped, weary beyond measure. He built a fire from dry wood and sat beside it, watching the flames twist and fall. "Why did you not let me die?" he whispered into the night. "If the ground rejects me, and men fear me, what life remains?" The fire crackled, but no answer came. Yet in the stillness, Cain felt something, neither comfort nor anger, but presence. The same presence that had spoken judgment now lingered like a quiet breath in the darkness. It did not speak, but it did not leave. He slept uneasily, haunted by dreams of his brother's face, by the sound of the Lord's voice, by the sight of the blood-stained field. When morning came, he rose and began again to wander. Time lost meaning. The sky above seemed endless, the horizon forever distant. But Cain was not forgotten. Others came, travelers and families spreading eastward, the children of Adam filling the land. They found him, feared him, but did not harm him, for the mark upon him struck awe into their hearts. They called him cursed, yet protected, broken, yet watched. In time, he built a dwelling, a shelter first of stone, then of wood, then walls strong enough to withstand the wind. It was the first city, and he named it Enoch, after his son. For Cain had taken a wife from among those who lived eastward, and she bore him children. Through labor and sweat, he built what his hands could no longer grow, a place of habitation, a city to hold his restless soul. Its streets were narrow and silent, its fires burned through the night. He taught men to craft tools of bronze and iron, to build walls, to make music that filled the air with haunting beauty. Yet even in creation, his heart found no peace. For every song reminded him of the voice he could no longer hear, every tool of iron echoed the stone that had struck his brother down. He was a builder in a world cracked by sin, raising towers against the emptiness within. The mark upon him glowed faintly in the moonlight, a promise that he would live, yet never truly belong. At times he climbed the city walls and looked west, toward the land he had left. He imagined his mother's face, aged and sorrowful, his father's hands, still working the cursed earth. He thought of Abel, the shepherd who had walked with peace in his eyes. "If you still watch me, Lord," he said once beneath the stars, "then why let me live this way? My brother's blood still cries within me. I cannot silence it." And though the heavens were silent, he felt again that quiet presence, the same mercy that had spared him. He did not understand it, but he knew it was real. His children grew, and their children after them. They built houses, forged instruments, tamed herds, and filled the plain with life. Civilization began from the hands of a murderer, and though sin had shaped him, the image of God still burned faintly through the cracks. The world outside Eden became a place of wonder and violence, of beauty mixed with sorrow. Cain walked among his people, gray and weary, his eyes shadowed by memory. They revered him, but he carried no pride. "Do not honor me," he told them. "Honor the one who still allows the sun to rise." In the evenings, when the city slept, he wandered to the edge of the plain, where the river met the wilderness. There he spoke aloud to the night, as if to his lost brother. "Abel, I cannot undo what I have done," he said. "But I have built what you never saw. The world will grow, though broken. Perhaps that is mercy." The wind stirred the reeds, whispering softly, almost like a reply. "Your blood cries from the ground," Cain murmured, "but maybe someday another's blood will silence it." The thought lingered in his heart, a mystery, a hope he could not name. He returned to the city, watching its lights flicker like distant stars. Generations passed. His descendants spread, inventing, learning, reaching for what was lost. Some worshipped God, others forgot him. The memory of Eden faded, but the hunger for its peace remained. And in Cain's final days, as his strength waned and his eyes dimmed, he sat once more beside the fire. His sons and daughters gathered around him, waiting for his last words. "You were born in exile," he said, "but even here, he is not far. The ground bears our curse, yet it still gives bread. The night holds our fear, yet it still brings stars. Remember this, the mark upon me was not only wrath, it was mercy. Never forget mercy." He closed his eyes, and the firelight flickered across his face. The wind passed softly through the room, as if carrying away his spirit. When morning came, his people buried him on the edge of the plain, near the river that had once given him rest. They built no monument, for his life was his warning. Yet the story of Cain endured, the tale of a man who bore both guilt and grace, the first to shed blood, and the first to learn that even beyond Eden, God still sees, still spares, still loves. The city of Enoch stood long after his passing, a reminder that mercy can rise even from ashes, and that every wanderer still walks under the same sky that once shone over paradise. Evening passed, and morning came, the day the children of exile learned that God's justice and his mercy walk side by side. Creation of the world, Part 11, the line of Adam, generations of the promise. The earth grew old beneath the weight of time. The memory of Eden had faded into whispers, and yet its echo still lingered in the hearts of those who came after. Adam and Eve lived long beyond their sorrow, their faces lined with years, their hands shaped by labor. The soil that once yielded fruit by ease now gave only through toil, but they learned to live within the rhythm of the curse. Eve bore more sons and daughters, and the world began to fill with the breath of men. Yet each birth was shadowed by the memory of loss, for the name of Abel still echoed in every child's cry, and the mark of Cain remained a story told by the fire. In their old age, Adam and Eve found a glimmer of hope again. Eve gave birth to another son and named him Seth, saying, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel, for Cain killed him." Adam held the boy and saw in him something of both mercy and promise. Seth grew and learned the ways of the field, but his heart was turned toward God. When he became a man, he too had a son and named him Enosh. And in those days, men began to call on the name of the Lord once more. The darkness that had spread from Cain's line did not consume all. Light still flickered through the generations, a quiet faith passed from father to son, like embers carried through the night. The descendants of Adam filled the valleys and plains, building homes, tending flocks, making tools, and raising their children beneath the same sun that had once shone on paradise. Time moved differently now, measured not by peace, but by endurance. Men lived for centuries, their lives stretching across the ages like the roots of a great tree. They built cities, they sang songs, they remembered. Adam lived 930 years before he died, and when he lay upon his bed for the last time, his children and grandchildren gathered around him. His eyes were dim, but his voice was steady. "Remember the Lord," he said. "We walked with him once, before the earth was hard and the heart was heavy. But he is not far from those who seek him." They buried him near the place where he had first tilled the ground, and Eve lived a little longer, often sitting by the field and whispering prayers into the wind. When she too passed, their children said the same words, "Dust we are, and to dust we return." Yet they also spoke another truth, the hope that dust was not the end. The generations continued. Seth begot Enosh, Enosh begot Kenan, Kenan begot Mahalalel, Mahalalel begot Jared, and Jared begot Enoch. Each man worked the earth, raised sons and daughters, and taught them to honor the Lord who still watched over his creation. But the world was changing. The line of Cain grew strong in the cities, men of power, builders, warriors. Their hands shaped iron and bronze, their hearts turned toward pride. They forgot the voice of the Creator and sought their own glory. The sons of Seth lived apart from them, keeping the ways of peace, though even among them, the shadow of sin crept slowly in. And yet, amid the growing noise of the world, there was one man who walked differently. His name was Enoch, son of Jared, seventh from Adam. From his youth, he sought not the things of men but the heart of God. He would leave the company of others and walk alone in the hills, speaking with the unseen, listening to the wind as though it carried divine words. People said that Enoch spoke with the Lord as Adam once did, though none could see with whom he walked. His life burned with quiet devotion. He taught that righteousness was not in strength or wealth, but in obedience. He warned of the corruption that would come, of the violence growing among the sons of men. And yet his message was hope, that God would not forget his creation forever. Enoch lived 365 years, and then the scriptures say, he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No one saw his death. His tent was found empty, his footprints vanishing into the earth. The people spoke in hushed voices, saying, "He has gone to dwell with the Lord." His name became a promise, a sign that the bond between heaven and earth was not broken, only hidden for a time. Generations passed again. Enoch's son, Methuselah, lived the longest of all men, nearly 1,000 years. He saw the rise and fall of tribes, the birth of new nations, and the creeping decay of human hearts. Violence filled the earth, and men no longer called upon the Lord. They built idols of stone and worshipped their own hands. But through Methuselah's line came Lamech, and through Lamech came Noah, a man set apart, destined to carry the spark of faith through the flood of judgment yet to come. Even as the world darkened, the thread of God's promise held firm. From Adam to Seth, from Seth to Enosh, from Enosh to Enoch, and from Enoch to Noah, the line of hope endured. Though sin spread like thorns across the soil, the seed of redemption was already sown. One evening, as the sun fell red upon the mountains, Lamech held his newborn son and said, "He shall bring us comfort in the labor and toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." And he named him Noah, rest. The word itself was like a prayer, a whisper of mercy after centuries of sorrow. The stars that night shone brighter than they had in years, as if heaven itself watched the promise unfold. Men continue to build and to forget, to strive and to sin. Yet through one family, God prepared his answer to a world bent toward destruction. For though Adam's dust had long returned to the earth, the breath of God still moved among his children. The promise spoken in Eden, that the seed of the woman would one day crush the serpent's head, still lived, carried forward through blood and faith, through frailty and grace. And so the generations continued, each name a thread in the great tapestry of redemption. The earth was weary, the sky heavy, but heaven had not turned away. Evening passed, and morning came, the dawn of the age when judgment and salvation would meet upon the waters. Creation of the world, Part 12, the corruption of the earth, the days of Noah. The generations of man multiplied across the face of the earth, spreading into valleys and mountains, filling the plains with cities and voices. The sons of Adam had become many, but their hearts had grown distant from the one who had breathed life into their dust. The knowledge that once bound them to God became pride, and pride gave birth to corruption. The sons of Cain built empires of stone and bronze. They filled the world with noise, with weapons, with music that praised men instead of the Creator. The line of Seth, once faithful, slowly mingled with them, and the fear of the Lord faded from memory. The daughters of men were beautiful, and the sons of power took them as they pleased. From their union came mighty men, warriors and rulers, whose fame spread across the earth but whose hearts were filled with violence. The earth trembled beneath their cruelty. Blood touched the soil again and again, and the cry that began with Abel never ceased. The ground groaned beneath the weight of sin, and the heavens grew silent. The Spirit of God, who once walked among men, now withdrew, grieved by their corruption. The Lord looked upon the earth, and what he saw pierced his heart. Every thought of man was only evil continually. The image he had formed in love now reflected violence and pride. The Creator who had once declared, "It is very good," now spoke in sorrow, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The decree passed through creation like a cold wind. The trees bent, the rivers stilled, and the stars seemed dimmer. Heaven itself mourned. But even amid the ruin, there was one man who walked differently, Noah, son of Lamech, grandson of Methuselah. From his youth, Noah turned his heart toward God. He worked the fields with honesty, spoke truth when others deceived, and lifted his eyes to the heavens when others bowed to idols. In a world that forgot its Maker, Noah remembered. The Lord saw him and found favor in his faithfulness. One night, as the world slept in its sin, the Lord spoke to Noah. The voice came not as thunder, but as a deep sorrow that filled the air. "The end of all flesh has come before me," said the Lord, "for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth." Noah trembled, his heart breaking at the weight of those words. But the voice continued, steady and sure, a thread of mercy woven through judgment. "Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms within it, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it: the length of the ark 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and set the door in its side. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life. But with you, I will establish my covenant, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you." The words sank deep into Noah's soul. He bowed his head and said, "Your will be done, Lord." When morning came, he began to work. His neighbors laughed when they saw him cutting trees in the dry plain. "What do you build, old man?" they mocked. "A vessel for rain that never falls?" But Noah did not answer their jeers. Day by day, he labored under the sun, his sons beside him, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, cutting, shaping, sealing the great timbers together. The sound of hammers echoed across the valley like a heartbeat of obedience. The ark rose slowly, its massive form standing against the horizon like a mountain of faith amid a desert of disbelief. For 120 years, Noah built and preached. He warned the people of what was coming, told them of the Lord's sorrow, begged them to turn from their violence. But they laughed louder, their hearts hardened like stone. They feasted and fought, took wives and built cities, and said, "Where's your flood, Noah? The sky is clear, and the rivers are calm." Yet the heavens were not silent. Clouds began to gather at the edges of the world. Winds shifted, strange and cold. Animals stirred restlessly in the fields, as if hearing a call only creation could understand. And still Noah worked. When the ark was finished, its frame sealed and strong, the Lord spoke again. "Bring into the ark 2 of every living creature, male and female, to keep them alive with you. Of the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, and every creeping thing of the ground, 2 of each shall come to you." And they came. From the forests, from the mountains, from the deserts, they walked, crawled, and flew toward the ark. Lions beside lambs, wolves beside deer, serpents beside doves. The sight silenced even the mockers, but still they did not repent. Noah and his family gathered food, water, and all that was needed. The ark stood ready. Then, for 7 days, the sky grew darker. The air turned heavy, and the earth fell silent. No laughter was heard in the land. The people looked to the sky and saw clouds swelling like mountains. Thunder rolled across the heavens. The first drops fell, soft, uncertain, like tears. Noah lifted his face and whispered, "It begins." The Lord said, "Enter the ark, you and all your house, for you I have found righteous before me in this generation." Noah led his family inside. The door of the ark closed, not by his hand, but by the hand of God. Then the rain came, not in drops, but in torrents. The heavens broke open, and the fountains of the deep burst forth. Water rose from below and fell from above. Rivers swelled, valleys vanished, mountains blurred beneath the flood. The people ran, crying out to the sky, to the hills, to the ark, but it was too late. The waters lifted the great vessel, and it floated upon the face of the deep. Inside, Noah held his family close as the thunder roared and lightning tore the darkness. Outside, the world was washed away. The cities of men sank beneath the rising sea, and every voice fell silent. Only the rain remained, and the sound of the ark creaking upon the waves. For 40 days and nights the flood covered the earth, and all that breathed perished. Yet in the heart of the storm, one light remained, the faith of a man who had listened, obeyed, and trusted. And above the waters, unseen, the Spirit of God hovered once more, as it had in the beginning. Evening passed, and morning came, the day judgment began, and salvation was born upon the waves. Creation of the world, Part 13, The Ark on the Waters, 40 days and 40 nights. The rain did not cease. It fell with the roar of endless sorrow, as if the heavens themselves wept for the earth they once blessed. For 40 days and 40 nights, the flood consumed the world. The fountains of the deep burst forth, and the sky poured down its fury. Mountains sank beneath the waves, valleys vanished into the depths. Every sound of life faded beneath the wind and rain until only the voice of the storm remained. Within the ark, Noah and his family listened to the crashing water and the groaning of the timbers. The vessel creaked and swayed, lifted high upon the waves like a single heartbeat of hope in a drowning world. The animals trembled in their stalls, and the darkness inside was broken only by the flicker of oil lamps. Yet through the chaos, Noah's faith did not waver. He sat beside the window, his face lit by the dim glow, and whispered prayers into the storm. "You have spoken, Lord," he said, "and I will trust you. The waters obey your word, and so shall I." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating endless oceans where once fields had stretched. Trees, cities, and mountains were gone. The world that had mocked Noah was now silent beneath the waves. The ark drifted over the ruins of creation, guided not by wind or hand but by the will of God. Inside, time lost meaning. Days blurred into nights, and nights into days. The rain hammered without pause, and the walls of the ark groaned under its weight. Shem, Ham, and Japheth worked tirelessly to feed the animals, to draw water, to keep the lamps burning. Their wives comforted the frightened creatures, whispering softly as they moved between the stalls. The air was heavy with the scent of wood, pitch, and life confined. At times, the sound of the storm grew so fierce that even the strongest heart quailed. Yet Noah's voice would rise in prayer, steady as the tide. "He who made the heavens can calm them," he said. "He who formed the waters can command their end." And though the rain did not stop, peace filled the hearts of those within. They remembered that obedience had saved them, not strength. Outside, the waters rose 15 cubits above the highest mountains. Nothing living remained. The great beasts were gone, the birds that once filled the skies were silent, and mankind's proud towers lay buried beneath the deep. The flood had undone creation, returning the world to the formless void from which it had begun. Yet even in judgment, mercy waited. For inside that wooden vessel, the seed of a new beginning floated upon the face of the waters. On the 40th day, the rain finally ceased. The thunder fell silent, and the roaring of the deep began to fade. The clouds still hung heavy, but no new waters came. For 150 days, the ark drifted across the endless sea. The sun rose pale through the mist, and nights brought stillness broken only by the sound of waves. Noah looked through the window and saw nothing but water in every direction. His heart longed for land, for trees, for the voice of the wind through the grass. Yet he waited. He had learned that waiting was faith made visible. Then, one morning, the ark shuddered softly. The sound was different, wood meeting stone. The vessel had come to rest. The waters had begun to recede. Mountains rose again from beneath the waves, their peaks gleaming in the sunlight. The ark rested upon the heights of Ararat, and Noah bowed his head in silent gratitude. "You remember mercy, O Lord," he whispered. Days passed, and the waters continued to drain from the earth. The air grew clearer, the light brighter. After 40 days more, Noah opened the window and released a raven. It flew back and forth over the waters, finding no place to rest. Then he sent forth a dove, gentle and white. The bird returned, its wings damp, for the earth was still covered. Noah waited 7 days, then sent the dove again. When it returned, it carried an olive leaf in its beak, fresh and green. Noah held it in his hands and wept. It was a sign that life had begun again, that the world was healing beneath the hand of its Maker. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove once more. This time, it did not return. The sky had opened, and the earth was ready to breathe again. Noah lifted his eyes and saw dry ground upon the distant plains. The mountains stood firm, and the rivers found their courses anew. The world had been washed clean. Then the Lord spoke to Noah from the stillness, his voice filled with both power and peace. "Come out of the ark, you and your family, and bring with you every living creature, that they may multiply upon the earth." Noah obeyed. The great door of the ark opened, and sunlight poured inside. One by one, the animals stepped out, the lion beside the lamb, the wolf beside the deer, each creature blinking at the brightness of a renewed world. Noah and his family followed, their feet touching dry ground for the first time in more than a year. The air was fresh and sweet, the silence filled with promise. Noah fell to his knees and built an altar to the Lord. He offered sacrifices of thanksgiving, and the smoke rose gently toward the sky. The scent pleased the Lord, and he said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground for man's sake, though the thoughts of his heart are evil from youth. Never again will I destroy all living things as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." Then a bow of colors stretched across the sky, arching from one horizon to the other, the first rainbow, a covenant written in light. Noah and his family watched in awe as the rain-washed heavens glowed with promise. The flood had ended. Judgment had passed. A new beginning had come. The world was quiet again, waiting to be filled, to be lived in, to be loved. Evening passed, and morning came, the first day of a new creation, and the promise that mercy would always rise after the storm. Creation of the World, Part 14, The Covenant of the Rainbow, God's Promise Renewed. The air was still after the storm, the world quiet as a held breath. The waters had withdrawn, leaving the mountains glistening with streams that sparkled beneath the new sun. The ark stood upon the heights of Ararat, its timbers darkened by rain, its door open to a world washed clean. Noah stepped out, his feet sinking into the damp earth, and for the first time in over a year he breathed the scent of living soil. Around him, his family looked in wonder. The sky stretched wide and pale, a canvas untouched by smoke or sin. The animals moved carefully into the open, blinking against the light. The lion and the lamb walked side by side, the birds took wing with cries of joy, and the earth itself seemed to sigh in relief. The flood had ended, and life began again. Noah's heart swelled with gratitude and awe. He gathered stones and built an altar to the Lord. Upon it he placed the clean animals and birds he had kept for this purpose, and he offered them as a sacrifice. The smoke rose into the sky, twisting upward until it disappeared into the heavens. Noah watched in silence, his hands trembling with reverence. The Lord looked upon the offering and was pleased. The scent rose before him as a reminder of faith preserved through judgment. And the Lord said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though his heart is evil from youth. Never again will I destroy all living things as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. A great peace settled upon creation, as if the world itself exhaled. The rain had washed away death, and in its place mercy grew. Then the Lord spoke to Noah and his sons, his voice clear and kind. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you shall fall upon every beast of the earth, every bird of the air, all that moves upon the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hands they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, as I gave you the green plants, now I give you all things. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. For your lifeblood I will demand an account, from every beast and from every man I will require it. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God was man made. Noah bowed his head as the words filled the air. It was not only instruction, it was restoration. God was re-establishing order, reminding mankind of their purpose, to rule with care, to live with reverence, to remember the one who gave breath. The Lord continued, his tone solemn yet filled with warmth. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth with your generations. And behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, never again shall the waters become a flood to destroy the earth. The family listened in awe. The sky above them, still damp with the memory of rain, began to change. Light broke through the thinning clouds, and as the sun emerged, its rays scattered across the mist. Suddenly, color filled the heavens, a great arc of light stretching from one horizon to the other, 7 hues woven together in perfect harmony. Red like fire, blue like the depths, green like new leaves, gold like dawn. It shimmered across the sky like a bridge between heaven and earth. Noah fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The Lord spoke again, his voice mingling with the whisper of the wind. This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature for all generations to come. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the land and the bow is seen, I will remember my covenant, and the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The bow shall be in the clouds, and I will look upon it, to remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living things. The colors shone brighter, their reflection dancing upon the water pool at Noah's feet. His sons watched in silence, the light of the rainbow reflected in their eyes. It was not merely a promise, it was grace painted across the sky. They knew that every storm to come would carry within it a reminder of mercy. For the same sky that once poured judgment now held the sign of peace. Noah lifted his hands toward heaven and whispered, "You are faithful, O Lord. You remember mercy even in wrath." The rainbow lingered long after the clouds had passed, arching over the mountains like a crown. Life began to flourish again. Streams flowed through the valleys, the trees sprouted leaves, and the fields turned green. The beasts spread across the land, filling it once more with movement and song. Noah and his family planted vineyards, built homes, and watched their children grow. Generations would come from them, each carrying the memory of the flood and the covenant of the bow. Yet even as peace returned, the shadow of sin remained. For though the world was washed clean, the heart of man was still flawed. Noah himself would learn this truth when, in his later days, wine clouded his wisdom and shame touched his house. The sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, would father nations that would one day fill the earth again, some remembering the Lord, others turning from him. But the rainbow remained, unchanging, stretching across time as it had across the sky, a promise that wrath would never again consume all life, and that mercy would always have the final word. The wind moved gently through the fields as evening came. The sun dipped low, and the last light of the day shimmered through the colors above. Noah stood once more and looked to the sky, his heart full of gratitude. The world was reborn, and above it hung the covenant of peace, glowing softly against the twilight. Evening passed, and morning came, the day when God bound heaven and earth with light and wrote his mercy across the clouds forever. Creation of the World, Part 15, The Sons of Noah, the Nations and the Scattering. The flood had ended, and the world was new. Rivers carved fresh paths through the soil, forests rose again from the damp earth, and the air smelled of life reborn. Noah and his family lived upon the slopes of the mountains, watching the valleys fill with grain. The rainbow still glimmered faintly above them, a reminder that mercy had triumphed over wrath. From the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the world began again. They tilled the ground, herded flocks, and built homes, each family growing and spreading outward into the waiting earth. Generations passed beneath the same sun, and mankind multiplied once more. The covenant of the bow was remembered, and for a time men feared God. They taught their children of the flood, of the ark, and of the promise written across the sky. But as the years stretched into centuries, the memory began to fade, and the hearts of men turned again toward pride. Among the sons of Noah, each line carried its destiny. From Japheth came the peoples of the coastlands, the Greeks, the Medes, the sons of Gomer and Javan, nations who would fill the far north and west. From Ham came the builders of cities, Nimrod of Cush, who became a mighty hunter before the Lord, founding Babel, Erech, and Nineveh, the first kingdoms of men. And from Shem, the chosen line, came the fathers of the Hebrews, the ancestors of Abraham, through whom the promise would one day return. The earth was full again, rich with sound and color. Men spoke one language, and their words carried power. They journeyed eastward from the mountains, and in the plain of Shinar they found a vast and fertile land. There they settled together, saying, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city, and a tower whose top may reach the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered across the face of the whole earth." Their hearts burned not with faith but with ambition. They remembered the flood not as mercy but as challenge. The sons of men began to craft clay bricks, burning them strong in the fire, and they used tar for mortar. The tower rose slowly, its foundations deep and its summit reaching higher than any structure before it. Its builders boasted that their work would touch the dwelling of God, that they would climb to heaven by their own strength. Smoke rose from their furnaces day and night, and their chants echoed across the plain. The unity of mankind had become the unity of pride. The Lord looked down from heaven upon their city and their tower. He saw the hearts of men, restless, proud, and blind to the covenant of peace. He said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this they begin to do. Now nothing that they purpose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." The words of the Lord rolled like thunder across the heavens. the builders awoke one morning to find their tongues divided. Where one spoke, another heard only strange sounds. Confusion spread like fire. The workers shouted but could not understand. Orders turned to chaos, arguments to rage. Tools fell from trembling hands, and the tower that had once risen in pride became a monument to disorder. They called the place Babel, for there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there he scattered them across the lands. Some went north to the mountains, others east to the deserts, others south to the forests and coasts. The nations were born, each speaking its own tongue, each walking its own path. The once great city was left unfinished, its summit broken, its stones half buried in dust. The wind carried away the songs of men, and in their place came silence. Yet even in judgment, mercy lingered. The scattering was not destruction but protection, a dividing of pride before it could destroy all again. Through the confusion, God was weaving the story of redemption, separating nations until the day they would be gathered once more by the one who would unite all tongues in praise. Noah lived long enough to see his son's children fill the earth. He watched from the mountains as tribes journeyed outward, carrying their flocks and tents to distant lands. He taught them to remember the rainbow and to honor the Creator who had spared them. But as he grew old, he saw the shadow return, the same arrogance that had filled the world before the flood now rising again in the hearts of men. He wept often and prayed that one among his descendants would walk with God as he once had. When Noah died, his sons buried him near the foot of the mountains where the ark had rested. The wind whispered through the valleys, carrying his name into history. The families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth continued to multiply. Kings rose, cities grew, and languages divided further. Yet through the line of Shem, a promise remained unbroken, a thread of faith stretching through the centuries, waiting for the day it would burst into light. The world had begun anew, but the need for redemption still beat within its heart. Men worshipped idols of stone and wood, seeking power in the works of their hands, but the voice of God was not silent. It spoke in dreams, in signs, in the quiet conscience of those who still listened. The nations wandered, yet the plan endured. For from Shem's seed would come a man named Abram, through whom all the families of the earth would one day be blessed. And though Babel had fallen, its ruins stood as a warning, that man may build kingdoms of stone, but only God can raise a kingdom eternal. Evening passed, and morning came, the day the nations were scattered, and the promise began to move through the winds of the earth. Creation of the World, Part 16, The Call of Abram, a Promise Beyond the Stars. The world had grown vast and divided. Nations spread across the plains and mountains, each speaking its own tongue, each worshipping its own gods of wood and stone. The descendants of Noah filled the earth, but few remembered the covenant of the rainbow or the voice that had spoken from heaven. Idols stood where altars once rose, and men bowed before what their own hands had carved. Yet amid the noise of kingdoms and the silence of faith, one man still listened. His name was Abram, son of Terah, born in Ur of the Chaldeans, a city of stone towers and moon temples, where the stars were worshipped as gods. But Abram saw the heavens differently. When others prayed to the stars, he wondered who had placed them there. When they sought signs in their movement, he searched for the one who set them in motion. His heart was restless, longing for something greater than the idols of men. He lived with his wife Sarai, a woman of grace and quiet strength, though her heart carried sorrow, for she was barren. Together they cared for their family and herds, living among people who had forgotten their Maker. Yet one night, as Abram watched the horizon fade into darkness, a voice broke the silence. It was not the voice of wind or dream, but the voice of the Eternal, gentle, vast, unmistakable. "Abram," it said, calling him by name as if it had known him forever. Abram fell to his knees, trembling. "Here am I," he whispered. Then the Lord spoke again, "Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." The words filled the air like light breaking through the dawn. Abram lifted his eyes toward the stars. They shone brighter than ever before, as if bowing to the one who had spoken. His heart burned within him, not with fear, but with faith. He did not know where the path would lead, only that the one who called was worthy of trust. When morning came, he gathered his family. Sarai stood beside him, her eyes filled with both wonder and uncertainty. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a land he will show us," Abram replied. "The God who spoke made a promise, and I will follow." Terah, his father, came with them for a time, and with them also came Abram's nephew Lot, young and eager for the unknown. They packed their tents, their flocks, and their servants, and set their faces toward the west. Behind them lay Uar, the noise of the city, the smoke of the idols, the gods that could not speak. Ahead lay a road unmarked by map or stone, a journey guided only by faith. They traveled through deserts and plains, crossing rivers and mountains, following the call of the unseen God. The days were long, the nights cold, yet each sunrise brought renewed strength. Sometimes they camped beneath the open sky, and Abram would look up at the stars and remember the voice that had promised him descendants as countless as those lights. Sarai would watch him from the firelight, her heart torn between hope and disbelief, for she still bore no child. "He said we will be a great nation," Abram told her once beneath the stars. "Then we must believe," she answered softly, though her eyes filled with tears. After many days, they came to the land of Canaan. It was rich and wide, filled with hills and valleys, streams and groves of oak. The Lord appeared to Abram again and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." Abram built an altar there, in the shadow of the trees, and called upon the name of the Lord. The smoke rose gently into the air, the first true worship in that land since the days of Noah. From there, Abram journeyed south toward the hills near Bethel and pitched his tent between Bethel and Ai. He built another altar and prayed, giving thanks for the promise though he had not yet seen its fulfillment. The people of the land watched him, wondering at this foreigner who spoke to an invisible God. But wherever Abram went, the blessing followed. His herds multiplied, his servants prospered, and his name began to spread. Yet even faith is tested. Famine came upon the land, and Abram journeyed to Egypt seeking food. There he faced fear, for the land of Pharaoh was filled with power and temptation. But the Lord was with him, guiding his steps and preserving his life. When he returned to Canaan, he was richer in faith than before, having seen that the one who calls also protects. Still, the promise seemed far away. The years passed, and Sarai's womb remained empty. At times, despair whispered to them both. But every time Abram lifted his eyes to the night sky, the stars seemed to speak, he who made us is faithful." And Abram believed. It was that belief, not strength, not deeds, that the Lord counted as righteousness. For faith, pure and childlike, was the bridge between heaven and earth. One evening, as Abram walked alone, the Lord came to him again in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield and your exceedingly great reward." Abram bowed and said, "O Lord God, what will you give me, seeing that I go childless?" "The heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus." The Lord replied, "This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir." Then the Lord brought him outside and said, "Look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them. So shall your descendants be." Abram gazed upward, tears glistening in his eyes. The heavens seemed alive with promise. He believed the Lord, and in that moment, faith became covenant. The stars above became symbols not of distance, but of destiny. The world still wandered, nations still bowed to false gods, but in one man's heart, the true covenant was born, a promise beyond the stars, a thread of light stretching through all generations, leading to redemption yet unseen. Evening passed, and morning came, the day faith took root, and heaven chose a man through whom all the earth would one day be blessed. Creation of the World, Part 17, The Covenant and the Promise, between God and Abram. The years passed like shadows across the desert. Abram grew older, his beard silvered with time, his hands weathered by the winds of many journeys. The promises of God still echoed in his heart, yet the child he had been promised had not come. The land before him stretched wide and silent, rich with promise but empty of heirs. Each night he looked toward the stars, remembering the voice that had said, "So shall your descendants be." Still, the 10 of his household remained without laughter. Sarai too grew older, her eyes tired but her faith not yet gone. She loved her husband deeply, and though sorrow weighed on her, she trusted the God who had called them from Ur. One night, as Abram sat by the fire, the Lord came to him again in a vision. The voice filled the tent like wind through leaves. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward." Abram bowed low and said, "O Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless?" "The heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus." The Lord replied, "This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir." Then the Lord led Abram outside and said, "Look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them. So shall your descendants be." Abram lifted his eyes to the endless sky, and his heart burned with faith. The promise was impossible by the measure of men, yet certain by the word of God. And Abram believed the Lord, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Then God said, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit." Abram asked humbly, "Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it?" And the Lord said, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." Abram obeyed, preparing the covenant offering as commanded. He divided the animals and laid them opposite each other, creating a path between them. As the sun began to set, Abram sat waiting, and a deep sleep fell upon him. Terror and darkness descended, and the Lord spoke again through the veil of shadow, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will serve there 400 years, but afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace." Then, as the night deepened, a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch passed between the pieces. It was the sign of the covenant, the presence of God Himself sealing His promise with fire. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, "To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates." When the morning came, Abram awoke trembling, his face wet with dew and tears. He built an altar there and worshipped, knowing that God's word was sure, though its fulfillment lay far beyond his sight. But faith is often tested by waiting. Time moved on, and Sarai's barrenness remained. In her longing, she turned to her maidservant Hagar, an Egyptian woman, and said to Abram, "The Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Go into my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her." Abram listened to her voice, and Hagar conceived. But when Hagar saw she had conceived, she looked with pride upon her mistress, and bitterness grew between them. Sarai, wounded and jealous, turned to Abram, who said, "Do what is right in your eyes." So Sarai dealt harshly with Hagar, and the maid fled into the wilderness. There, by a spring of water, the angel of the Lord found her. His voice was gentle, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She answered, "I am fleeing from my mistress." The angel said, "Return to her and submit yourself under her hand. I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they shall not be numbered for multitude." And he said, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son, you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction." Hagar obeyed and returned, bearing Abram a son. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Years passed again, and Abram's hair turned white. When he was 99, the Lord appeared once more, brighter than morning, His voice filling the air with holiness. "I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you and multiply you exceedingly." Abram fell on his face, and God spoke again, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of many nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of multitudes. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring forever." The promise burned brighter than the sun. The Lord continued, "As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. I will bless her, and she shall give you a son, she shall be a mother of nations." Abraham bowed his head and laughed softly, not in scorn but in wonder. Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90, bear? But God said, "Indeed, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant." The Lord then gave Abraham a sign of the covenant, circumcision, to be a mark of the promise between God and His people forever. When the Lord departed, Abraham obeyed immediately. Though his body was frail, his spirit burned with faith. The covenant was sealed not by the power of man, but by the faithfulness of God. The stars that night seemed nearer than ever, as if leaning close to watch the promise unfold. Abraham stood beneath them, the wind moving softly around him, and he whispered, "Your word is everlasting, O Lord. I believe." And heaven heard. Evening passed, and morning came, the day the covenant of faith was written not in stone, but upon the heart of a man who trusted the voice of God beyond all reason. Creation of the World, Part 18, Visitors at the Oak of Mamre, the promise takes shape. The sun hung high above the plains of Mamre, and the heat of the day lay heavy upon the tents of Abraham. He sat in the shade of the great oak, his eyes half closed against the brightness, listening to the quiet hum of life around him. The flocks grazed in the distance, the servants moved softly among the tents, and Sarah was within, kneading flour to make bread. Though the years had been many, Abraham's heart remained steadfast. The voice of God still echoed in his soul, the promise of a son, of nations, of blessing that would reach the ends of the earth. Yet Sarah's womb was still silent, and her hair had turned white. They had learned to live between promise and fulfillment, between faith and waiting. As Abraham lifted his eyes toward the horizon, he saw 3 men standing nearby. They seemed to have appeared out of the shimmer of the heat itself, their figures radiant and calm. Without hesitation, Abraham rose and ran to meet them, bowing low to the ground. "My Lord," he said, "if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. I will bring bread that you may refresh your hearts, after that, you may pass on." The 3 looked upon him with kindness and agreed. Abraham hurried back to the tent and said to Sarah, "Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine flour, knead it, and bake cakes." Then he ran to the herd, chose a tender calf, and gave it to a servant to prepare. He brought butter, milk, and the roasted meat, and set it before his guests under the oak. As they ate, Abraham stood nearby, attentive, reverent. There was something about them, something beyond moral presence. When one of them spoke, his voice carried a weight that stilled the air. "Where is Sarah your wife?" he asked. Abraham answered, "She is in the tent." Then the Lord said, "I will surely return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son." Within the tent, Sarah heard the words. She paused in her work, her hands trembling. She laughed softly to herself and whispered, "After I am old, and my Lord is old also, shall I have pleasure?" Her laugh was not mockery, but the fragile sound of disbelief born of long sorrow. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I surely bear a child since I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you, and Sarah shall have a son." Sarah stepped out from the tent, her face pale. "I did not laugh," she said quickly, afraid. But the Lord looked at her with gentle eyes and said, "No, but you did laugh." The words carried no rebuke, only promise. Sarah's heart beat fast, and though she said nothing more, something within her stirred, a flicker of hope long buried. The men rose after their meal and turned their eyes toward the distant valley. Abraham walked with them a little way, as was his custom, to see them off. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that he shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed through him?" And he said to Abraham, "The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grievous. I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the cry that has come to me." The 2 men went on toward the plain, but the Lord remained standing before Abraham. The air grew still again, and Abraham knew he was in the presence of the Almighty. He bowed his head and spoke with trembling courage. "Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city, will you also destroy it and not spare it for their sakes? The Lord replied, If I find 50 righteous within Sodom, I will spare all the place for their sake. Abraham hesitated, then said, Indeed now, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there are 5 less than 50 righteous, will you destroy the city for lack of 5? The Lord answered, If I find 45, I will not destroy it. Abraham pressed on, his voice low but steady. Suppose there are 40 found there. The Lord said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Abraham continued, Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. The Lord replied, I will not do it if I find 30. Again Abraham said, Indeed now, I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. The Lord said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then Abraham said, Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more, suppose 10 are found there. The Lord answered, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. The silence that followed was deep and solemn. Abraham bowed his head, tears glimmering in his eyes. He understood the weight of mercy and judgment that hung over the world. When the Lord had finished speaking, he departed, and Abraham returned to his tent beneath the oak. The evening light lay soft upon the hills, and Sarah came to him, her face thoughtful. Neither spoke of what had happened, for words seemed too small for what their hearts felt. That night, as the stars emerged one by one, Sarah stood at the tent's entrance, gazing upward. The same heavens that had once seemed empty now shimmered with promise. She placed a hand upon her heart and whispered to the wind, Is anything too hard for the Lord? The breeze carried her words into the dark, as if heaven itself received them. And Abraham, lying awake beside her, closed his eyes and smiled, knowing that the Lord who had spoken would surely do as he had said. Evening passed, and morning came, the day when angels walked among men, and the promise of life began to quicken within the heart of an old woman. Creation of the World, Part 19, The Judgment of Sodom, Fire over the Plain. The sun was setting behind the hills when 2 strangers came to the gate of Sodom. The air was thick with dust and noise, the streets crowded with merchants and revelers. Lot sat by the gate, as was his custom, watching the life of the city unfold with weary eyes. He had chosen this place years before, drawn by its green valleys and flowing rivers, though its people had long turned from righteousness. When he saw the men approaching, something in their bearing struck him. There was purity in their faces, calm in their steps, a light that did not belong to Sodom. He rose quickly and bowed low. My lords, he said, turn aside, I pray you, into your servant's house. Wash your feet and spend the night, then you may rise early and go your way. But they answered, No, we will spend the night in the open square. Lot's heart trembled, for he knew what the streets of Sodom became after dark. Please, he urged, turn into your servant's house. And when they consented, he led them quickly inside and prepared a meal of unleavened bread. They ate in silence, but their eyes searched the city through the open window, their faces heavy with unseen knowledge. Before they could rest, a pounding began at the door. Voices shouted from outside, growing louder with each moment. The men of Sodom had seen the strangers enter and had gathered in the night, young and old alike, their hearts filled with corruption. Where are the men who came to you tonight? They cried. Bring them out to us, that we may know them. Lot stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The torchlight flickered on his face as he raised his hands to the crowd. "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly," he pleaded. But they only laughed and jeered, pushing forward. "Stand aside. This man came to sojourn, and now he acts as a judge. We will deal worse with you than with them." The mob surged, and Lot was nearly torn apart. Then the door burst open, and the two men reached out, pulling him back inside. In an instant, a blinding light flashed from their hands, and the men outside were struck with blindness. They stumbled in confusion, groping for the door they could no longer find. Inside, the strangers turned to Lot. Their voices were calm but urgent. "Have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this city, because the outcry against it has grown great before the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." Lot ran to his sons-in-law and cried, "Up! Get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." But they laughed, thinking he was jesting. As dawn approached, the angels urged Lot again, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." Still he lingered, his heart torn between fear and disbelief. Then the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his daughters, the mercy of the Lord compelling them, and they led them out of the city. When they had brought them outside, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed." Lot trembled and said, "Please, my lord, indeed your servant has found mercy in your sight. You have magnified your kindness, but I cannot escape to the mountains lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, there is a small town nearby, let me flee there, is it not a little one, and my soul shall live?" The angel said, "See, I have granted you this favor also, I will not overthrow that city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I can do nothing until you arrive." Therefore the city was called Zor. The morning light broke over the horizon as Lot entered Zor. Behind him, the plain stretched silent beneath a rising wind. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire from heaven upon Sodom and Gomorrah. The ground shook, and the sky blazed as if the sun had fallen to earth. Flames devoured the cities of the plain, and smoke rose like the breath of a furnace. Houses crumbled, towers melted, and every living thing perished. The laughter that had filled those streets was silenced forever. But as Lot and his family fled, his wife looked back toward the city. Her eyes lingered on what she loved, the home she had left, the life she could not release. And in that moment, she was caught in the judgment she had turned to see. Her body stiffened, her breath ceased, and she became a pillar of salt upon the plain, standing as a monument to a heart divided. Lot reached Zor with his daughters and fell to the ground, trembling as the sky burned behind him. From afar, Abraham stood upon the heights where he had prayed. That morning he rose early and looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and all the land of the plain. He saw the smoke rising from the earth like the smoke of a great furnace. His heart was heavy, but he knew the Judge of all the earth had done what was right. The memory of his pleading still echoed in the air, 50, 40, 10, and though the cities were gone, one family had been spared. Lot remained in Zor for a time, but fear filled his heart. He and his daughters fled again to dwell in a cave in the mountains. The silence there was deep, broken only by the wind. The world below lay scarred by fire, and they lived with the memory of what had been lost. Thus ended the cities of pride, the places where men forgot God and glorified themselves. Yet even in judgment, mercy endured, for the lineage of the righteous was preserved. From the ashes of Sodom, the promise to Abraham remained unbroken. The fire had cleansed, but not destroyed the plan of God. Evening passed, and morning came, the day when heaven rained fire, and the plains were silent, yet the covenant of faith still stood firm beneath the stars. Creation of the World, Part 20, The Birth of Isaac, Laughter of Promise. The dawn broke soft and golden over the hills of Canaan. The air was cool, the wind gentle upon the tents of Abraham. Years had passed since the fire fell upon Sodom, and peace had returned to the land. The oak of Mamre still stood tall, its leaves whispering in the morning light. Beneath it, the promise of God had once been spoken, and now, at last, it was time for that word to become flesh. Sarah, old and frail yet filled with a light that age could not dim, felt the stirrings of life within her. The Lord had visited her as he said, and the impossible had begun to unfold within her womb. The tent that had once echoed with disbelief now filled with the quiet hum of faith. Abraham watched over her with awe, his eyes full of wonder. The promise he had waited for nearly a lifetime was drawing near, and the weight of God's faithfulness pressed gently upon his heart. Then came the day of birth. The sky outside was still and bright, and within the tent the cries of new life filled the air. A son was born to Abraham and Sarah in their old age, exactly as the Lord had promised. Abraham fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, as he held the child in his arms. His hands trembled as he whispered the name that God had given him, Isaac, which means laughter. Sarah looked upon her son and laughed, the sound soft and joyful like music rising from the ashes of doubt. God has made laughter for me, she said, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. Her heart overflowed with joy that could not be contained, for the promise that once seemed distant and impossible had come to rest in her arms. Abraham, now 100 years old, lifted the boy toward heaven and blessed the Lord. "You are faithful," he said. "You have turned my sorrow into joy and my waiting into laughter." As the child grew, the camp rejoiced. Servants sang songs of thanksgiving, shepherds danced among the flocks, and the hills echoed with praise. The boy's laughter became the sound of the covenant made visible, a living reminder that nothing is too hard for the Lord. But even in joy, the world still tested faith. In time, Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking her child. Jealousy flared, old wounds reopened, and she turned to Abraham. "Cast out this bondwoman and her son," she said, "for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." The words pierced Abraham's heart, for Ishmael too was his son, his blood. He sat long in silence, torn between love and obedience. That night, the Lord spoke to him in the stillness. "Do not let it be grievous in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed." At dawn, with sorrow heavy upon him, Abraham gave Hagar bread and a skin of water, placing them upon her shoulder along with the boy. She looked into his eyes one last time, then turned toward the wilderness of Beersheba. The desert stretched endless before her, and the sun rose fierce above the sand. When the water was gone, she laid her child beneath a shrub and wept bitterly, unwilling to watch him die. But God heard the cry of the boy, and the angel of the Lord called from heaven, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the boy, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She filled the skin and gave the boy drink. And Ishmael grew and dwelt in the wilderness, becoming an archer, his descendants forming a people of their own. Meanwhile, in the tents of Abraham, peace returned. Isaac grew strong, his laughter filling the camp like sunlight through leaves. He followed his father through the fields, asking questions about the stars, the sheep, and the God who had given him life. Abraham would lift him into his arms and say, "You are the promise, my son, the laughter of God's word fulfilled." And when night fell, they would sit beneath the same sky where Abraham once counted stars, and the father would whisper prayers of gratitude, his voice trembling with love and awe. The covenant was alive before him, no longer only words but a child who bore the breath of heaven. The years passed, and the bond between father and son deepened. Isaac became the joy of his parents' hearts and the living sign that God keeps every promise in his time. The tents of Abraham became a beacon of faith among the tribes. Kings and travelers came seeking peace with him, for the favor of the Lord rested upon all that he did. He planted a grove at Beersheba and called there upon the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. The wind carried his prayers across the plains, and the stars above shone brighter as if listening. Sarah's laughter grew softer with age, but it never left her. Each time she watched Isaac play, she remembered her own disbelief and smiled at how tenderly God had answered. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? She would murmur, cradling her son. Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. The promise had become flesh, and the laughter of one family would become the joy of all nations. For through Isaac, the covenant would continue, stretching across generations until it reached the one in whom all promises would find their end. And as the sun set over the tents of Abraham, the world stood bathed in the light of fulfillment. Evening passed, and morning came, the day when faith turned to sight, and the laughter of a child became the sound of God's eternal promise. End of Cycle 1, Creation of the World. From the birth of light to the birth of Isaac, the first covenant stands fulfilled. The story of creation gives way to the story of promise, the beginning of God's redemption through faith, laughter, and the unbroken word of heaven.